In contemporary African politics, we often witness leaders taking power through illicit means, that is, through coups, rigged elections, and violent suppression of opposition parties, suggesting strength. But this kind of outward projection of power conceals a profound fragility within such people. Shakespeare's Hamlet, written in the 16th century, mirrors this crisis of political legitimacy with startling precision. The extract I've chosen to reflect the global issue of political legitimacy and usurpation from Act 3, Scene 3, where Claudius laments the state of his soul after killing his brother and taking his wife and throne. By stripping away Claudius's public display of power and stately speeches, Shakespeare intervenes into the debate surrounding illegal taking of power. Through a masterful deployment of fractured syntax, visceral olfactory imagery, and an irreconcilable dichotomy between earthly impunity and absolute justice in the private space of a soliloquy, he exposes the inescapable psychological toll of power taken wrongly. He argues that whilst a usurper may outwardly manipulate a nation's legal system to gain power, they cannot escape from the moral harm to their own souls. Firstly, I want to start by looking at Shakespeare's use of imagery. Shakespeare immediately establishes the impossibility of sanitizing political violence. In the opening lines of the soliloquy, Claudius begins with sensory revulsion, and I quote, "Oh, my offence is rank, it smells to heaven, it hath the primal eldest cursed upon it, a brother's murder," unquote. The olfactory imagery here, rank and smells to heaven, is a stark authorial choice. It bypasses any kind of intellectualization, framing the political assassination not as a strategic necessity, but as an organic, putrefying rot that infects the usurper. Furthermore, the biblical allusion to the primal eldest curse, that is Abel's, the murder of Abel by Cain, it makes the crime very universal, and it links it to a lot of us, especially those of us who believe in the Abrahamic religions. To a contemporary audience, this linguistic choice resonates deeply with the ways modern dictatorships tend to, attempt to wash, as we say in Ghana, wash their histories. In lines 45 to 46, Claudius asks if there is rain enough in the sweet heavens to wash it white as snow. The rhetorical question underscores the futility of attempting to ignore or rationalize wrongly spilled blood. Blood cannot be washed away with nice words. The psychological toll begins with the inescapable reality of the violence used to acquire power, that is, murder. Second, I would like to highlight some clever structural elements Shakespeare employs to mirror Claudius's psychological fracturing through caesura, end-stop lines, and anaphora. In earlier speeches by the king, he uses highly stylized, controlled, rhythmic iambic pentameter that Shakespeare often reserves for the speeches of the nobility. The linguistic structure in this private rumination by the king mirrors his psychic fracture, particularly through the use of the caesura and end-stop lines that tends to arrest the flow of the verse, forcing, for example, if it's an actor acting it, it forces the actor to articulate the very hesitation that traps the Claudius. He is, as he confesses, like a man, and I quote, to double business bound, caught entirely between the performative demands of his sovereign role and the crushing private terror of spiritual damnation. This spatial and moral contradiction demonstrates how the psychological toll of illegitimate power manifests not merely in abstract guilt, but in the crippling inability to move forward, rendering his political victory entirely hollow. The caesuras and the halting rhythm of these lines enact Claudius's cognitive dissonance. He is trapped between the desire for spiritual absolution and the refusal to surrender his ill-gotten gains. Shakespeare locates the core of the king's tragedy in the lexicon of possession in lines 51 to 55. And I quote, "But oh, what form of prayer can serve my turn? Forgive me my foul murder? That cannot be, since I am still possessed of those effects for which I did the murder. My crown, mine own ambition, and my queen." Readers will notice that the anaphoric weight of the possessive pronouns, my crown, mine own ambition, and my queen, Claudius's identity has become inextricably linked with the spoils of his crime. Shakespeare astutely observed that the usurper cannot simply step down or repent. The power they stole becomes their being and their identity. This speaks directly to the modern the dictator's dilemma. They are hostage to their own corruption. They are unable to relinquish the effects of their power without facing complete annihilation. Thirdly, I'd like to look at Shakespeare's use of juxtaposition in putting side by side earthly corruption and inescapable accountability. Claudius observes a cynical truth about human institutions in lines 57 to 60. And I quote, "In the corrupted currents of this world, offence's gilded hand may shove by justice, and oft is seen the wicked price itself buys out the law." The personification of offense's gilded hand, shoving justice aside, perfectly encapsulates systemic corruption, where wealth and illicitly gained power insulate the powerful from from domestic consequences. Claudius knows that he has successfully rigged this earthly system. However, Shakespeare pivots sharply with the adversarial conjunction, but it is not so above, there is no shuffling. Here, the psychological tool reaches its peak. Shuffling, which is a term connoting trickery and political maneuvering, has no currency outside the artificial construct of politics. Claudius realizes that his political legitimacy is a localized fiction. The horrifying realization in lines 62 and 60 to 64 that we ourselves are compelled to give evidence against ourselves portrays the usurper's own conscience as the ultimate inescapable judge. I'll conclude with Shakespeare's clever and devastating use of metaphor. The soliloquy concludes with one of Shakespeare's best metaphors. "O wretched state, O bosom black as death, O limed soul that's struggling to be free, art more engaged." A limed bird is one caught in a sticky trap. The harder it fights, the more entangled it becomes. This is the ultimate diagnosis of the usurper. Shakespeare demonstrates that political legitimacy obtained through illicit means is not a triumph, but psychological trap. Every action taken to secure the usurped power only deepens the moral and psychological entanglements. Ultimately, this extract from Hamlet transcends its early modern context. Through its granular linguistic and structural choices, it serves as a permanent, damning psychological profile of the usurper. It reminds us that while the gilded hand of the usurper may temporarily control the state, the illicit nature of this accent to power guarantees a profound, inescapable internal fragility and rot. Thank you.